Hey guys, I'm going to list my top 5 favorite Don't Starve Together challenges in case you guys might want to try them out for yourselves. I'm going to be listing them in order of difficulty, but when I rate the difficulty, I'm not referring to how difficult it was for the creators of these challenges to create and complete them. I'm talking instead of how difficult I think it is for us to try them out for ourselves, where we copy the preparation and strategies that the creators have already laid out for us. I don't ever remember doing this challenge from day one, so I can't speak for how difficult the actual preparation might be. I only clearly remember simulating the fight like I'm doing now in the video with approximately Joe's inventory spawned from console commands. The fight itself is not the most mechanically difficult of Joe's challenges, but there is a lot of strategy involved with when you chop or burn down the spore caps, do you even bother to get rid of the spore caps, when to use the panflute, where to position, and when to attack Toadstool. There are probably multiple ways to go about this fight given the restrictions of the inventory. With roughly the same inventory, I went about this fight very differently from Joeshmocoolstuff, which is why I never tried the challenge from day one. I feel like I would have to change the preparation a lot because of that difference. One thing I would have changed is to maybe start and end this challenge in spring, but I never bothered to come up with my own preparation route, so although I think it should be very possible to speedrun Toadstool that way, I cannot say for sure. But in spite of that, the speedrun is still among my favorites because this is where we learn that the Morning Star is the perfect weapon for fighting Toadstool. It might be common knowledge to us now, but it clearly wasn't at the time when he made that video. I never saw anyone use a Morning Star for any boss before Joe made that speedrun. The Morning Star's durability only deteriorates when we have it equipped, so it isn't affected by the number of times we attack with it. This makes it very efficient for the fight because of Toadstool's huge amount of HP. It also isn't affected by spoilage unlike a Hambat that will spoil very quickly because of the spore clouds. You will almost certainly have to fight Toadstool a few times besides the spore clouds with the restrictions of the challenge. And lastly, the Morning Star will do the most damage out of any weapon as long as you fight Toadstool in the state of wetness. This is why Joeshmocoolstuff chooses to fight Toadstool in spring for the speedrun. This is Don Giani's Bee Queen challenge. The fight is done without healing or armor, and with roughly the inventory that I'm using here. The way I go about learning any of these challenges is to start with more than what is restricted when practicing the mechanics of the fight. So I started with healing and armor, and I also used a Hambat instead of the dark sword that Dawn was using, just so that the fight would last longer and I could get in more practice for the more difficult parts. Then once I was confident enough, I switched over to doing it with all of the restrictions. The challenge is a good mix of strategy and control. There are some strategies used to avoid the Grumblebees and single out the Bee Queen, but doing this challenge also involves being good at controlling your character. You will need to move your character with a little precision, and you will have to be at least a little comfortable with switching between items. I won't go further into the details of the challenges because you should watch Joeshmocoolstuff and Don Giani's videos for that. But I will mention that I discussed with Don Giani that there is a big difference between going for 3 or just 2 hits on Bee Queen. The timing and positioning of going for 3 attacks is a lot more precise, which is why I told Don that I think if we tried this in an actual game, we would do this 100% of the time if we only went for 2 attacks instead of 3. I think that small difference of how often you go for 3 attacks would change how difficult you want to make this challenge. This was a difficult fight to learn for the first time. Even with the bees and the bee mines, this is not an easy challenge if you want to get it done at around the same time that Joeshmocoolstuff did it. Your healing and armor will be slightly limited because much of the preparation for this run revolves around collecting a lot of bees for the fight. So without an insane amount of armor and healing, your kiting ability will be a major factor. The other factor is how well you can use whatever road is available to you for the fight. If the claw sack spawns in an area without any natural roads, you will have to place down some cobblestone. I'm only using 5 cobblestone tiles here because the bees will mostly keep claws in place. But whether you're using natural roads or cobblestone, learning to use the roads precisely in winter where it will be difficult to see the flooring is a big part of the difficulty of this fight. Aside from the fact that kiting Enraged Klaus even with the bees is also pretty difficult. I think this speedrun will remain as one of my favorites because we learn here how to dodge the Enraged Klaus bite attack. The first time I had ever managed to kill Enraged Klaus was only after watching Joeshmocoolstuff's video and copying basically everything that he did. And the first time I ever attempted to kill Enraged Klaus without bees was only after learning how to dodge the bite. What we consider cheese in this game is subjective, but I do not consider using bees or bee mines cheese. The kiting is different, but it is still difficult, and if you are doing it for the purpose of a speedrun, then the bees were the perfect option in my opinion. I think this is probably the most remarkable Don't Starve Together speedrun. If I remember it correctly, Joe made this not too long after the Fuelweaver was just added into the game. I think at the time we had just finished figuring out how to actually beat the Fuelweaver, but apparently Joe was already figuring out how to speedrun it instead. There's so much to gather and so much to do with 2 boss fights that are necessary even before you get to the Fuelweaver, and to top it off, the final fight without weather panes is also quite difficult. I remember this being a very exhausting challenge to copy. I think the fight itself is not as difficult as Joe's fight with Enraged Klaus, or even with his fight with Toadstool, but some things can definitely go wrong, especially with the killing off of the woven shadows in time. And if you consider the fatigue factor of the run taking over 3 hours, then overall I think this is definitely the most difficult of his speedruns. Clay did change something with the Fuelweaver fight since Joe made that video, but I don't think the speedrun is really affected by it. I spawned in roughly Joe's same inventory, and the fight is more or less the same. What Clay changed was our ability to hug the walls to avoid getting trapped by Fuelweaver's snare. Clay must have had their reasons for changing this, but I don't agree with the change if they were trying to make the fight more difficult. If Clay wanted to make the preparation more difficult, then yes, making the Lazy Explorer essential accomplishes that. But the change is only increasing the difficulty of the preparation and not really changing the difficulty of the fight. Because if we have to use the Lazy Explorer, then of course the fight is just going to be easier. I think all the change really did was to deny us a more challenging option of doing this fight without needing to teleport. If I take into account the time when Joeshmocoolstuff made that speedrun, the precision of the route he mapped out, the difficulty of the final fight, and the overall creativity, I think the Fuelweaver speedrun is probably the most impressive Don't Starve Together challenge I have ever seen. But I'm not placing this as my number 1 in terms of difficulty for us, because a lot of the difficulty was already shouldered by Joe in coming up with the whole preparation for us to just copy. So while it is probably my favorite among all of these challenges, there is one remaining challenge that I think is far more difficult for us to try. I learned 2 things from Don Giani in this challenge. The first is that we can dodge Dragonfly's initial attack consistently with a staff, and second is that we can minimize the fire damage we take from Enraged Dragonfly by moving a little bit away after our first attack. But learning those 2 things won't take away anything from the difficulty of this challenge. This is definitely the most mechanically demanding fight I've ever tried in the game. It is all about execution. You have to be good with character control, positioning, Dragonfly timing, Enraged Dragonfly timing, and a little bit of item switching. And unlike in Don Giani's Bee Queen challenge, where we can move away earlier if we want to play it safe, Dragonfly punishes us both for moving away too late and also for moving away too early. There's something very punishing about this challenge if you try this now. I asked Don about it, and he explained that the fire damage works differently now than when he did the challenge. Apparently, we take a lot more fire damage than we used to. The challenge is so crazy right now that if I take just a single hit from the Enraged Dragonfly, or just 2 hits from regular Dragonfly, and do everything else perfectly, I will still die to the fire damage. I also feel like there is a lot of RNG involved in where the larvae spawn, and I don't really have a way around it yet if I get unlucky. I'm not sure what this would be like trying this from day one. It is only a very short amount of preparation, but with the RNG involved and the fire damage as it is right now, I'm not going to be trying this from day one anytime soon. If you enjoyed watching or trying out these challenges, and if you're only finding out about them through this video, go watch Joeshmocoolstuff and Giani's videos, and hopefully they will make more of them in the future. Thank you for watching.